Right, great. So I think we are good to begin now. So a very, very warm welcome to all of you again for joining us this afternoon for the ISDM Knowledge Series session. Today's discussion is on lives and careers in development management. And the discussion will be facilitated by Gaurav Shah. Gaurav is one of the co-founders of Indian School of Development Management, and he's an alumnus of BITS Pilani and IIM Calcutta, and comes with more than 13 years of experience in both the private sector as well as the development space. So Gaurav will be sharing with us his understanding of what the development sector looks like in India today and what kind of opportunities, careers the young people can expect for themselves in this sector. So I will hand over to Gaurav now, who will be taking us through the presentation. There will be question and answer sessions in between the entire presentation. So that is the time when you can interact with Gaurav. So for those who are watching the live stream on YouTube, please use the chat window to put in your comments or your questions. And for those who are logged in through the phone, you will be able to speak with Gaurav during those question and answer sessions. And during this entire webinar, if you face any issues, please do let me know. I will share my phone number on the screen, so you can send me an SMS or even let us know through email or whichever way possible for you. Yeah. So thanks once again, and I am handing over to Gaurav now.
Thanks a lot, Gagan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I hope everybody else can. So we will check on the chat just now.
Great. So, Gagan, the screen share is not showing. Yes, now it's working.
Okay.
Great. So, warm welcome to everyone here for this webinar on lives and careers in development management and in the development sector overall. As Gagan has mentioned, we'll try and keep the discussions to about an hour and 15 minutes, and it will be largely interspersed. So it'll be sessions of some thoughts being shared by me, interspersed with question and answers. Gagan also mentioned that this medium that we're using currently, which is YouTube Live, has a couple of shortcomings. One is that I can't hear you. So we tried to overcome that by using the FCC telephone conference bridge. So people who are on the bridge, you can definitely share your questions, your comments, your thoughts during the Q&A sessions. Besides that, I can also see the comments that people are sharing on the YouTube live chat. So, we'll definitely make an effort to incorporate some of those during the discussions. The other shortcoming is that there is a short time lag between the presenter and the audience, and therefore there is a possibility that you might hear periods of silence in the middle. But don't let it bother you. Don't get worried about it. That's perfectly fine. Great. From a structure standpoint, we'll split today's discussion into 3 sections. The first section will talk about the idea and the concept of development and the kind of work that we do here in the sector, along with some of the reasons that people potentially use to actually work in this space, or the reasons that people talk about. Section 2 will take you through a thought framework that you can use if you're considering a life and a career in this sector. It's actually a series of questions which will help you think through and come to decisions. And section 3 will delve a little bit into the development management space and explore the opportunities, career-wise and otherwise, that are presented in that space. So before we start section 1, I just pause for any preliminary questions or any preliminary expectations. If you'd like to share something, you could do that now.
Gaurav, you have your camera on?
I do.
Okay. Because some people are not able to see you.
I do have my camera on. I've switched it on again. I switched it off and I switched it on again. See if this helps. Is it okay now?
Yeah, now.
I think you need to share the screen once again, Gagan.
Yeah, now you're there.
Okay. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Great. So, any questions, thoughts at this point, or shall we begin?
Yeah, please continue, Gaurav.
Okay, wonderful. So, starting with section 1 and the entire idea about development. So, what really is development? We could sit for hours and months and days really talking about what development is and what it means and what are the various ways of looking at it. It's an extremely complex concept with various people actually having their own viewpoints on it. So different people can actually look at it through different lenses and with different viewpoints and come up with their own ideas, own definitions of what it means, what it incorporates. As a concept, as an idea, it can really allude to and include many different concepts within itself. So, we can talk about social development, cultural, political, cognitive, non-cognitive, emotional, physical, environmental, etc. There are various ways of really looking at it. The idea of development actually has also evolved a lot over time. Right from the entire roti kapda makan kind of an ideology of the 70s and 80s in India, to the provision of basic HDI parameters, relating to education, relating to health, relating to per capita income and a standard of living, to the creation of active citizens, active and involved citizens who can take part in decision making in the country and really contribute in taking the country ahead. Development is focused, is multifocal. It has many different aspects, and it's also a concept which has evolved over time. And you can almost look at it as a spectrum. in itself. Development has also moved forward from the welfare-based approach, which we had earlier, where a lot of the dependence of development was on the government, and from a welfare standpoint, it's almost the government taking care of the citizens, and in some ways, doing them a favor by doing that, to a more rights-based approach, where the citizen says, hey, yeah, right, education is my right, or this kind of information of food is my right, or there are various kinds of right-based approaches that we are now looking at. So towards the end of the last millennium, a lot of the countries in the world under the umbrella of the United Nations actually came together to try and define the development agenda of the world. And that's what led to the creation of the MDGs, or the Millennium Development Goals, and then the subsequently the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, while there are a lot of claims and counterclaims on whether the MDGs were successful or whether they were a complete failure, but a lot of people say that the 15 years from 2000 to 2015 saw amongst the largest drops in poverty that we've ever seen in human history. There was huge reduction in child deaths. There was huge reduction in deaths due to malaria, etc. So we obviously made a lot of progress on multiple parameters. However, we did not meet the Millennium Development Goals in toto, and that laid the ground for phase 2 of MDGs, which were the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. And in some ways, through the Sustainable Development Goals, the world has set the agenda of what we want to do in the development sector over the next 15 years. So from 2016 to 2030. And, it defines the kind of work areas that we're looking to work at. There are 17 different goals that have been defined as part of the SDGs. And there are 169 metrics or targets under, all of these 17 goals that the world has articulated as really important. Some of the, while there are obvious overlaps between MDGs and SDGs, there are some areas where the SDGs have moved way ahead of the MDGs. So things like, the effect of violence and conflict on development is something that was missing in the earlier version of the goals, or the importance of generating jobs as part of inclusive development, or the idea of integrating economic, social, and environmental development into a more coherent pattern is something that the SDGs are looking at much more seriously. The beauty of these SDGs and the 17 goals is that each of us looks at it differently, and probably each of us will be able to identify an area that tugs at our heart, or that we are passionate about, or that we really want to work at and help improve. And if you look at goal number 17, that really in some ways brings together the first 16 goals, which talks about the fact that we definitely need to adopt a more collaborative, a more partnership-based approach if we need to make a significant dent in the development issues and make a significant progress towards social development. So these give us a brief sense of the agenda that the world has set. Moving ahead, if you look at the reasons that people actually give to join the development sector, there are multiple reasons. There are some reasons which are societal, and there are some reasons which are personal. So everyone knows that if you ask people what the development sector is all about and what are the various areas of work, a lot of people will actually talk about the development goals and the issues that we face therein. But very few people will actually be able to back it with any kind of metric-based understanding of what the reality is. So if you look at how India has developed over the last 70 years of independence, we've actually come a long way. We started our journey in 1947 with a literacy of 8%, with a life expectancy of 23 years, with poverty of upwards of 99%. And in 2016, now we've moved the literacy from 8 to 74, life expectancy from 23 to 65. and poverty really, ranges anywhere between 22 to 30%, depending on which study you really look at. So we've definitely come a long, long way. However, there is still a long way to go. If you compare our parameters to some of the developed countries, we still have a long, long way to go. So, on HDI, or the Human Development Index, for example, we are ranked 135 out of 187 countries. On the Corruption Index, we are ranked 76 out of 168. We have an income poverty level of, as I said, anything between 22 to 30%. If you look at the literacy rate, while we are at 74%, the female literacy rate is 65, and that reflects a certain societal mindset. The sex ratio is at 940, which again reinforces the same kind of gender discrimination mindset. If you look at developed countries, literacy rate is close to 100%. If you look at, for example, infant mortality, which is the number of infant deaths below the age of 1 per 1,000 births, we are at around 42 right now. If you looked at most developed countries, they would be around 5 or 6. They would be definitely in the single digits. So we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go, and that really sets the grounding for the first set of reasons that people give, which is the fact that the society in general is asking bright young individuals to come and join the sector, because these are amongst the most complex problems that we can talk about, and these are some of the most complex problems that the country is facing, and you definitely need the brightest minds to come and actually help solve some of these problems. But to my mind, working in the development sector, and given the complexity of problems, the reason cannot be external. So while the society is saying, hey, why don't you come in and really work on these issues, I feel if you want to work in this sector for a long period of time, if you want to make your life and your career in the sector, then we really must find the reasons internally, rather than look at reasons outside and look at reasons in society. And therefore, the next set of reasons are really personal, and if you talk to people on why they have joined the sector, they give many different reasons, some of which are as follows. One of the most and oft quoted reason really is, hey, I've got so much in life, I should give back. Somewhere hidden in that logic is a sense of guilt. The world, obviously has huge issues. There are many people who don't have anything, who are living in really poor and squalid conditions. And here, I've been given a lot, so I should give back. There is a guilt motive. There's a guilt logic to that. The other reason that people give is that, hey, I have some skills and perspectives and knowledge and qualifications. If I don't really work in this space, then what? There's almost a sense of being a giver, that, hey, I have the ability to give, so why didn't I do that and actually contribute in this sector? Again, while these are all valid reasons to work in this space, for me, neither of these reasons, whether it's guilt or whether it's sense of what I call social power, are really worthwhile long-term reasons to work in this space. Because I don't think that when the rubber hits the road, either of these reasons will really be able to sustain you. When things get tough, you'll find a way out of the guilt. Because really, what are you guilty about? You were born in a certain family, and that wasn't in your hands. It was nothing more than an ovarian lottery in some ways. So you'll soon realize that, hey, it's not your problem or your issue. And the other thing which really looks at the concept of social power, at some point will or might lead to arrogance, and that's never good working in this space. When you start feeling and realizing that, hey, I'm the giver, you'll at some point realize that really, people who I'm giving to have not really asked me to come and give. And that can never be a long-term reason to be in this space. For me, the only long-term sustainable reason is that working in the sector gives you happiness. And helping solve some of these issues gives you the kind of satisfaction which keeps you here and which keeps you involved in this sector. But Having said that, I also believe that different reasons work for different people, and there is really no one right answer to this, complex question of really why should anyone or why should I really work in this sector. So that's the end of section 1, where we try to look at what development is, what are the kinds of work within the development sector, and really what are some of the reasons that people have for working in this space. I'll pause for any questions or any comments or clarifications that people might have.
So for people who are watching the on YouTube live can post their comments or questions in the chat window, and those who are connected on the phone can directly address their queries, and Gaurav can answer for everyone.
Manisha, I'm not very clear on your questions. You've said something with respect to reasons for working in the development sector. Okay, so you're agreeing with me. Okay. Vijay, you're saying no questions. Amandeep, no questions. Okay. Does what? Sorry. So absolutely, Mani. I think absolutely. I think community participation forms the bedrock of all the work that we do in this sector. I think without that, the work that we do in this space would really have no feet. If you're not able to work with the people who you're working for, and if you're not able to involve them, then we'll really struggle with whatever we're trying to do. It also begs to bring into play right now the entire idea of agency, which is the ability of people to actually have a say in their own lives, have a say in how they want to live, have a say on how they want to see things going ahead. So yes, Mani, community participation is really, really important. Manisha, your question, if population is a key factor, it's a root cause of a number of developmental issues. So, there will supply and demand is always going to be a key factor. So if we have enough and more resources vis-a-vis the population that we have, then it will not be an issue. If we don't, then it will definitely be a very, very key issue in some of the issues that we face. Mhm. How exactly is the development sector sustaining itself? Ranchi, if you could tell me a little bit more about your question. I'm not very clear. So let's take it, let's move on to the next section. I'm a little bit conscious on time, and we'll come back to this question, Viranchi, in the next Q&A. Is that okay, Gagan?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Great. So the next section really, we'll try and take you through a thought framework that you could use if you're interested in making a life and a career in the development sector. A lot of people, when I talk to them, say, "Hey, I really feel for the issues, and I'm, passionate about social change, and so I'm a natural fit for this sector." I think that it's useful to actually go through a certain a certain thought process, a series of questions to find your own sweet spot within the development sector. The first question that you really need to ask yourself is, how much time do you really have? And the answer to that will then lay the ground of the kind of involvement that you can potentially have with the sector. For a lot of people, working in the development sector is a question of volunteering, which means it's a time involvement of maybe a couple of hours a week, and that's fine. Different time frames work for different people, and there should be absolutely no judgment in that. We should be happy with what we're doing, and we should be comfortable with what we're doing. But if you move along the time spectrum, after volunteering, the next option really is part-time. Is when people are doing something as a full-time career, and then they take maybe a day or two a week out of that. And nowadays, with more flexible careers available, it is possible to do that. So from a couple of hours a week, people can actually move to maybe a day or a couple of days a week to actually work in this space. And then obviously the next logical step is, hey, this is what I really want to do. This is where I really want to spend the rest of my life. These are the issues that I really want to deal with. And therefore, I want to make this a full-time career. And this question, while the thought framework may come across as chronological, it's not chronological. In fact, it's fairly iterative. And the series of questions that we'll be discussing is something that you'll keep coming back to time and again, over and over. But this question becomes very important because it lays the foundation for what you can potentially do in the sector. The next question is, okay, so you want to work full time. That's great. What issues are of interest to you? So I'm going back to the SDG slide, and people need to ask themselves, okay, what do I really work on? Am I really interested in the no poverty goal, in the renewable energy goal, in the quality education goal, in peace and justice? What is it that really tickles me? What is it that tugs at my heart, and what is it that I'm really passionate about? And a lot of people say, hey, but I want to do multiple things, and I say that's great, but it's important to identify a few things, because it's really important to develop one's own understanding in some of these areas. Each of these areas are fairly technical and require you to spend a fair amount of time developing your understanding on what it means, what are the issues in those areas, what is the ground level reality in those areas, how do we actually go about working in those areas, designing interventions, and trying to bring about a change. The entire thought that, hey, I'm of good heart and good intent, and therefore the sector should accept me, is really flawed. And it's really hilarious as well, if you ask me, because just because I love automobiles doesn't make me a great automobile engineer. I need to really study it. Or just because I love suing people doesn't make me a great lawyer. I really need to study to become a good lawyer. Similarly, in this space, while there is a general notion that all I need is a good heart and good intent, I think it's time we start changing that notion, because we really need well qualified and well prepared professionals to work in this space, and people who understand each of these different things. So the second question really is, what area are you interested in, or areas are you interested in? The third question you need to ask yourself is, okay, what kind of organizations would I really like to work for? And today the sector, if I was holding the session maybe 10-15 years ago, the answer to that would be fairly simple. I would want to work in an NGO. Even today, NGOs constitute the biggest chunk of organizations in the development sector, but they are no longer the only set of organizations that you can work in. Even within NGOs, there's a huge variety now. So, they're split by geography. You have, local NGOs, regional NGOs, national NGOs, and international NGOs. Then they're split by sectors that they work in, and whether it's health or education or livelihoods or environment, etc. And they're also split by strategic orientation. There are NGOs which are completely focused on service delivery. There are others which are focused on rights. There are others which focus on research and knowledge creation. So there are many, many different kinds of strategic orientations, and you need to decide what kind of an organization are you comfortable with. Also, one of the biggest factors in this decision is, in some ways, the decision on whether you are more comfortable working very close to the ground, or are you more comfortable playing a more wider kind of a role? Because the kind of organizations would in some ways define the kind of work that you would do. For example, a CSR team would do very, very different kind of work compared to a local NGO. If you join, for example, It'll Give Foundation, you do a lot of work in actually identifying NGOs, in actually doing grant making, in actually following up with NGOs, in figuring out how the work is going out, in designing interventions at that level, potentially also supporting NGOs. But if you join, for example, a ground-based NGO, the kind of work that you'd be doing will be very, very different. You could potentially also join social and corporate foundations. While there are some social and corporate foundations which are operating entities, a lot of them have actually become funding entities. And therefore, it's a very, very different kind. You'd be doing a lot of program management and project management kind of work, a lot of fundraising kind of work at a very different level. You'd be doing a lot of network creation kind of work at that level. We also have what we call social enterprises now. Social enterprises actually are defined variously by different people. If I look at the most commonly accepted definition, I would say that these are for-profit enterprises which are mission-first organizations. So, they are not for profit. They exist also to make profit, but what they do with that profit is very different from what, say, a regular for-profit enterprise would do. And the way they make decisions and the importance of mission and the entire integration of social, economic, and environmental goals is much stronger in these kind of enterprises compared to regular commercial enterprises. So you have many, many different kinds of opportunities in social enterprises, whether it's in microfinance, in education, in health, in livelihoods, etc. Then you have support organizations. You can get into social sector consulting if you feel that, hey, problem solving, working across many different kinds of sectors with many different kinds of organizations is something that you enjoy doing. And really working in the abstract is what you enjoy doing. Then social sector consulting could be your, ball game. You could work in social sector investment banking, which is literally helping other organizations in the sector raise money. Whether that's equity, whether that's debt, whether that's grants, etc. So the third question really is, so the first question is, hey, what time, how much time do you have? Second is, what issues do you want to work on? The third question is, okay, what kind of organizations do you really want to work in? The last question in this thought framework is, okay, I've chosen that I want to work full time. I've chosen that I want to work in the education space. And I've chosen that I want to actually work, say, in a social or a corporate foundation, which works in the area of education. So what kind of work do I really want to do? And that, the sector today gives you the ability and gives you the options of actually choosing from a variety of different kinds of work that you can actually do in this space. If you had asked this question again 10-15 years back, the answer would be, hey, you need to go and work at the ground with the community, evolve solutions at that level, and implement solutions at that level. And while that probably even today is one of the most important things you can do, but today the sector provides you the opportunity to get involved in a variety of different ways. For example, if you're the academic variety and if you like doing research, if you like teaching, you can get into the entire knowledge generation and knowledge dissemination piece, where a course for example in development studies at various universities in India and abroad could prepare you for a fairly academic research based engagement with the development sector. And each sector really requires people of this kind, because you need people who can generate knowledge continuously. You need people who can generate new outlooks and new ways of doing things on a continuous basis that the rest of the sector can actually use. And so this is one way, and people like this, can then work in think tanks. They can work in research organizations. They can work in foundations which do knowledge generation kind of work, etc. The next kind of work, people say, hey, I'm not very academic, really. This is not what I want to do. But I really believe if you want to drive social change, then public policy is what will drive that. A lot of people believe that, unless you have the right kind of policies, you cannot drive social change on the ground. In fact, you need the right kind of policies to do any kind of change. And therefore, there are enough and more courses in public policy, whether it's at the Kennedy School in Harvard, whether it's in the LKY School in Singapore, or National Law School India, TIS India, Takshila India. There are many different institutions which are now offering programs in public policy. Unfortunately, in India today, public policy as a career is not that well developed. So the ability to actually, do work in researching policy, in designing policy, in evaluating policy, in implementing policy is not as widely available as in maybe other countries. And therefore, people with public policy kind of backgrounds end up in think tanks, end up joining social sector consulting organizations, end up as program managers running projects, etc. But this is an area which is of need and which is of interest to a variety of different people. Then there are people who say, hey, policy is great, but until you really work on the ground with communities and implement that policy properly, you can do whatever you can at the policy level. There's no way you can actually make a difference. And these are the kind of people who are technical by nature, who love getting into the depths of issues on the ground, who love exploring and working with communities and exploring solutions, and really, in some ways, form the backbone of the entire technical work in this space. There are people who understand education, or understand environment, or understand nutrition, or health, or livelihoods, and can literally become experts in those spaces. They are practitioners, but they are practitioners, and they are field practitioners, but they are technical field practitioners. And you can do, again, a variety of programs to prepare yourself to work in roles of this nature. The most common and the most widely present program really is the MSW. And there are hundreds and hundreds of colleges in India which offer MSW. Again, the most widely known MSW, or the MA Development, MA Education kind of programs. So whether it's the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, whether it's Nirmala Niketan, the Delhi School of Social Work, Madras School of Social Work, or the Azim Premji University, there are many different colleges and institutions which offer programs of this nature. And then there are, there is the entire area of what we call development management. While the technical folks are great at working on the ground and designing solutions, you also need people to build the right kind of social organizations with the relevant strategy, structure, systems, processes, and culture. People who understand what development really means, who understand ground level realities, and are able to actually use that understanding in building these kind of organizations. People who can design large scale social interventions, implement them, evaluate them, monitor them, and most importantly, I think people who understand the importance of collaboration, of creating networks, of the entire idea of systems thinking, and are able to approach things from a fairly collaborative standpoint to create collaborative ecosystems, which will really take things ahead in this space. And that really is the entire area of development management. And in section 3, we'll talk a little bit more about this. So these are, some of the different areas. And I also talked earlier about consulting. You can also work in consulting. As I mentioned, if you are interested in broadly the entire problem solving space, but in a very abstract manner, you are interested not in developing expertise in an area, but working across many different areas with different kinds of organizations and clients, then that's probably an area that you can look at. So I'll pause again. I'll quickly, rephrase the 4 questions. 1, how much time do you have? 2, what issues are of interest to you? 3, what kind of organizations do you want to work for? And 4, what is the kind of work that you really want to do in the sector? And somehow thinking through these, analyzing them, trying to understand yourself better will help you find your sweet spot in the space, and probably help you find something that you really enjoy doing and something that you're really good at.
So now we can have more questions. So you can please type your questions or your comments in the chat window.
So I've got Viranchi's question again, and he says, how do organizations working for social development sustain themselves financially? So Viranchi, it's an interesting question. Like all sectors, I think the development sector has its own ways of funding itself, of sustaining itself financially. And there are different kinds of organizations which do it differently. The most common way of financial sustainability is grants, because most organizations in the sector do not have a revenue model which is consumer facing, or consumer maybe not be the right word, but which is beneficiary facing, that you don't necessarily charge the people that you're working for it. In fact, this is one of the biggest differences between the corporate sector and the social sector, and one of the reasons which underlines the importance of development management versus business management, because the mindset is very, very different. In the business space or the commercial space, the investors are the ones who put in money, and they put in money with a very clear mindset of financial returns. You as the management or the leadership person in the corporate actually then use that money to generate returns, and you give it back to the investors as return on investment. That requires a very, very different thought process, very different mindset. The way you approach decision making and problem solving is then very, very focused on those financial parameters. However, in this sector, you are getting money from a certain set of people, and it's actually benefiting a very different set of people. And you have to make sure that both these sets of stakeholders are equally taken care of. In fact, the sector exists for the people for whom the money is being used, not necessarily for the people who are giving the money. And therein lies one of the biggest challenges of a development manager or a development leader, is how do you really maintain the balance between these two sectors. So grants is one of the biggest sources, and grants can be multiple fold. You can get retail funding, which is funding, which is the entire Milap model or the Kiva model or the Givo model. which is crowdfunding. You can get grants from high net worth individuals. You can get grants through CSR now, and you can get grants from international organizations. The other way to get funding in the sector is for social enterprises which are for profit, and then they raise money through equity, which is similar to what the for-profit commercial enterprises do. However, for impact investors or social investors who put in money in social enterprises, the social return on investment becomes a very, very important parameter, along with a relatively lower financial return on investment. I hope that helps, Branchi. So there are lots of questions about the course, the program at ISDM. I would really suggest that we keep it offline and try and keep the webinar a little bit more generic. We're happy to answer some of those questions, and maybe Gagan, you can take down the names of people who are asking these, and let's get in touch with them separately.
Sure. But there are some other questions as well, Gaurav. So if you could just take a look.
Sure, I'm trying to go through that. So money, again, climate change is an area of interest, and you can just take some time out from your job. Then there are many different kinds of organizations which are working in the climate change area. We'd be happy to help you with names. You can also Google, and I'm sure you will find you'll be able to find organizations who are looking for volunteers. And definitely, as an individual, you can take up development work. Manisha, example of an existing social enterprise. So a lot of the microfinance organizations are actually social enterprises because they have a financial model, and they have a very clear social objective. So whether that is Ujjivan, whether that is SKS Microfinance, whether that's Equitas, Suryoday. Then if I don't know if you heard of it, but there's an organization called Hippocampus Learning Centers, which is into affordable rural preschooling. And so again, the Asian Development Bank and other social investors have put in money there. That is also a social enterprise, Manisha. It's called the Hippocampus Learning Centers. Amandeep saying, how do I apply for roles that you've mentioned? It's hard to come across such postings. Can one directly shift from corporate to the development sector, or does one need to have some voluntary experience? So Amandeep, there are particular sites where postings of this nature are put. So whether it's DevNet is the most oft used, nextbillion.net is one, Barefoot is one. So there are many different sites which actually have social sector job postings. There are lots of different LinkedIn groups, CSR jobs, NGO jobs, etc., which have postings of this nature. But again, I don't know your background, Amandeep, but my suggestion would always be that you should spend some time preparing yourself to work in this sector. Pick up a course, see what you're interested in, find a relevant course, and do that. That will help you actually settle into the sector more easily, and you'll be able to contribute more meaningfully. Rupesh, you're asking, can development managers influence public policy? Of course. I think one of the biggest asks of development managers would be that they actually bridge the gap between these multiple stakeholders. Stakeholders on the ground, stakeholders on the funding side, and stakeholders on the policy side. And that's one of the very key requirements of being a development manager and development leader, is this entire mindset of thinking about things from a systems perspective and of actually approaching things from a systemic solution standpoint. So yes, Rupesh, I think that would definitely be a expectation. Joseph, would a career in development management ensure financial stability as some other management degrees offer? Joseph, today, the sector, and that's one of the reasons I talked about so many opportunities that the sector has today. Today, the sector gives you the option to actually earn a fairly decent salary and live a life, of dignity. It does not expect, it does not really expect you to live in poverty or, to sacrifice or make huge financial sacrifice to work here. Of course, salaries will differ from role to role and organization to organization. Um, Typically, an international NGO will pay much more compared to, say, a local NGO. Typically, CSR organizations will end up paying much more, or large corporate foundations will end up paying much more. So it's almost a choice between the kind of work that you want to do and the kind of money that you feel you need to make. Because there are some people for whom working on the ground, working on solutions at the ground with the community is what gives them satisfaction. And if that's really what you want to do, then working with, for example, a local NGO or a regional NGO or even a national NGO is your choice, and that's something you should do. But it's a choice that one will need to make between the kind of job that you will end up doing and the kind of pay that you could make. Sonakshi says that a lot of people just don't know about all this, and that's why they don't go ahead. Completely agree with you, Sonakshi. One of our aims and goals at the Indian School of Development Management is how can we really talk more and more about lives and careers in the development sector and try and attract more and more bright talent to come and enter the sector, because really the sector has changed. It's not what it was when I started looking out for work in the sector. What the sector offers to young people today is very, very different, much more exciting, much more diverse, and much, much more rewarding. Roshni, again, you're asking, how does the ISDM course help us in choosing our line of work? I'll come to that in the third section, Roshni. Okay. Kaushik, will organizations registered under Section 25 of the Companies Act be considered as social enterprises? Yes, absolutely. And in fact, that's one of the ways of defining a social enterprise is when you register your organization as a company, because registering as a company requires you to measure yourself up to the highest levels of regulatory compliance and transparency. One of the critiques of trusts and societies is that it's very, very difficult to know what's really happening. But once you register yourself as a company, everything is in the open. You have to share a lot more things and be a lot more transparent. And yet, under Section 25, or what is now called Section 8, Kaushik, if you register yourself as a not-for-profit company, you also told the world your intention that while I'm full on compliance, I'm also very, very clearly a not-for-profit. Vishwa, any opportunity to work for the government? Now, Vishwa, I'm not very clear. Do you mean any opportunity in general to work for the government? Of course. I mean, the government is by far the largest social sector player, much, much larger than any of the kinds of organizations that I've talked about. And I largely talked about the private space very consciously. But the government is by far the biggest player with the biggest budgets and the biggest ability to actually create impact. The government is also, in some ways, the biggest chance of sustainability of the kind of work that we are doing in this space and of scale. If you really want to take your work and do it across an entire district, entire state, entire country, then really, government is our best hope. Government does have many, many opportunities. It has many programs that it's running, whether it's the National Rural Health Mission, National Rural Livelihoods Mission, or the Urban Livelihood Missions, or Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, or many, many different programs, or the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Now you have the Swachh Bharat Preraks in many districts. So there are many opportunities today for youngsters to actually apply for different kinds of government positions and actually work with the government. So we are nearing the, the 1 year, the 1 hour deadline. I want to quickly move on to section 3, and then after section 3, in case there are more questions, we'll be happy to take them up. So section 3 really talks about development management overall, and the variety of careers that one can look at within development management. So I must start by saying that development management is new in India as a concept. It is evolving, but it's extremely important. More and more. So till now, over the last 30-40 years, the the uh, the underlying belief or the ongoing belief in the development sector has been, give me good technical people and give me funds, and we will make good quality social change happen. And I think what we've realized now over the last 10-15 years is that's great. And while that's necessary, that might not be a sufficient condition. So to supplement good quality technical skill sets and funding, you need people who understand the sector, and on the basis of that understanding are able to build world-class social organizations with appropriate strategy, structure, systems, processes, and culture, who are able to design large-scale social interventions, implement, evaluate, monitor them, and really create collaborative ecosystems to help deliver sustainable social change at scale. And this is really where you need good quality development managers. Social workers are great and really suited for the more for the technical work, may not be ideal and most optimal from an organization building standpoint. Even from their interest standpoint, it may not be in this area. MBAs, and I can speak from experience because I am an MBA and I made a move from the corporate space into this space. MBAs actually struggle to understand the sector because we are trained very differently and we are trained to think very differently. And our abilities to build organizations are also different kind of environment. So the kind of cultures that we understand, the kind of organization structures that we understand, the kind of stakeholder management, stakeholder engagement that we understand, amongst other things, are fairly different compared to what's really needed in this space. And that, the fact that both these solutions are suboptimal or far from optimal really lays the grounds for the for development management and for the need for good quality development managers and leaders. There are a variety of different areas that development managers can actually work in, right? And many organizations now are recognizing that even within the development sector and have started creating positions of this nature. So starting from strategy based positions or database decision making positions, which are a little bit analytical or which are fairly strategic, to program management, to organization building, to a lot of communication engagement. Communication, brand building are very important. Storytelling. It's an extremely important area of work in this space and one of the most ignored areas of this space. Obviously, with the 2% CSR rule, CSR over time will become more and more important as career options and as people and organizations realize that this is in some ways fait accompli. That now the 2% CSR is very much there, and we might, if we are spending the money, then we really might as well spend it properly and do a good job with that 2%. You'll have more and more people, and they'll realize that they need the right kind of people to do the right kind of work. Right now, what's happened is a lot of the CSR placement is internal. So you have the existing CSR, you have the existing HR folks or people from communications or sustainability backgrounds, which are now taking over CSR roles. I think over time, people will need and people will realize the importance that you need people of a different kind of mindset and understanding. And obviously fundraising. And I've just listed here some of the variety of different areas that development managers can actually look at making careers. Business management in India started about 50 to 60 years back when the first IIMs were set up. At that point of time, even the corporate space was largely led by technical folks, which was largely engineers. And MBAs came in, and over time they demonstrated that they add genuine value to the entire business space, to the extent that they created an entirely new career space for themselves. And while the engineering and technical career space also existed, but the general management space became a very, very exciting space for people to enter. Also, what they were able to do is help the corporate sector professionalize. A lot of the organizations were promoter-led, single promoter-led, personality-driven, personality-led kind of organizations. I think over the last 40, 50 years, we can now say with a lot more confidence that we have a lot more professional-led organizations in the corporate space in India. And I think that's one of the other big roles that the development management space will really look at fulfilling, and development managers will look at fulfilling, is professionalizing this entire space and moving it away from being a personality dependent space, which is more where sustainability becomes a much bigger issue, because once the person or the personality moves out, then in many cases the organization or the intervention collapses. So I'll take a break here. It's been an interesting 1 hour of discussion. I will take a break for any more questions, any more clarifications. As I said, we are happy to take questions on ISDM, on the program specifically, but I would want to do that separately rather than on the call. If you have other generic questions and answers, we're happy to take them out. So Tapas has written that why are degrees like MBA given more priority over masters in social work with field experience, and is that becoming a trend in the development sector? So Tapas, I think I'm not sure I agree with that in a generic standpoint. I think it's with respect to specific roles that preference is given, and that preference is given probably because the MSW program doesn't satisfy those requirements. As I said, it is a technical program and it's meant to satisfy some requirements. It cannot, as a program, satisfy all requirements. For example, after a development management program, if somebody is looking at a nutrition expert, then I would not imagine that they would hire a development manager to become a nutrition expert or a curriculum or a pedagogy expert, because that's not what the person has been trained for. Whereas you could do roles like that potentially after programs which look at developing expertise in those areas. That's one. The other reason, and that's a personal take, Tapas, I don't know if it's universally true, but I think it also has to do a lot with the quality of MSW programs that are on offer. So you'll also find that MSW graduates from a specific set of organizations get a lot more value compared to MSW graduates in general. I hope that helps. Udayan has said, could you talk about the various roles at a development sector organization for someone who wants to be a practitioner, being in the field, executing education programs, etc., not a managerial M&E fundraiser role? So then, the role, I mean, there are many different kinds of roles. You could look at playing those roles at multiple levels. So this is in some ways also a misnomer that a management a manager needs to be one away from ground level realities, or will necessarily be away from ground level realities, or need not be technical in nature. So you could play program coordinator roles, program manager roles, you could play on ground social worker roles, you could play technical roles with respect to program design, you could play technical roles with respect to M&E. And M&E is a very technical on-the-field role, Udayan. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with, being a manager or being a leader. So all of these roles are available for people who want to work at at the ground level. And you need more and more people to actually be able to do that. Is that a financial financially sustainable career, or do you see growth as being a program manager director? So then, fortunately or unfortunately, from an organizational standpoint, most of the growth starts happening from a team management standpoint, and therefore you start as an individual contributor, and then you become, you start managing, a very small team, then a larger team, a larger geography, and then, even a large, an even larger team in geography. So most of the growth in organizations happen on the team side. There are very few roles, which are available as individual contributors at a senior level. And that's true across multiple sectors. It's not just true about this sector. You might find some roles available at the mid-level, senior level, which are individual contributors, but you won't find too many. Okay. Tapas is saying managing a program versus visualizing field reality is working on the ground, working with community, understanding their issues, etc. Two very different things. I do agree with that, Tapas, but that doesn't mean, and I will reinforce it again and again, doesn't mean that if you're managing a program, you don't need to understand ground level realities. Anyone working in this sector, in whatever role you are in, you must have experience of working on the ground. You must understand the issues on the ground. You must have a sense of the people you are working for. Without that, the kind of work that you will end up doing will be meaningless and will not be valuable at all. The difference between being a development manager and a technical manager, or a technical professional and development management professional, is over time the kind of careers that you might take up will be different. But you must, the grounding of both of these careers must be at the ground level. So Vijay wants to know more about the program and how this curriculum is going to be. Vijay, can we do that on a one-on-one? Or if people want, I can quickly take you through the program. I don't have any issues, but I don't want to spend time for people who already know or have already gone through the program. So I'll park that, Vijay, for the time being. In case there is time, we'll definitely take that up. So to Manisha's question, Manisha saying, will courses like the one ISDM offers, which is a one-year postgraduate program in development leadership, have more credibility and will be given equal importance as an MBA degree? So Manisha, the idea is that over time, this should be the place where people from this sector come for management and leadership talent. They should not be going to an MBA institution over time. And the kind of response that we are getting from our partner organizations, given that this is just our first year, is very, very gratifying. It's very encouraging. And we're seeing a lot of acceptance of the fact that you need more and more people of this kind. Of course, will ISDM be the only organization over time? No. In fact, one of the parameters of our success at ISDM really is how can we mainstream the entire idea of development management? If over the next 5 to 10 years, many more organizations, educational institutions start offering development management as a program, if it starts, if it starts becoming mainstreamed in terms of presence and acceptance, then we've done a great job. And that, that really is the overall vision and dream with which ISDM has been set up, is how do we create an entirely new discipline called development management, and how do we create an entirely new profession and an aspirational profession called development management. Right. Any more questions which are not related to the program? Kaushik says, I'm working as organizational development fellow with our organization, where we are trying to embody ethical and moral standards and trying to take a value-based and highly participatory approach to leadership. That's great, Kaushik. I've seen some of the work that you all are doing, and I think it's wonderful. Kaushik is also going to be part of the first batch at ISDM, and we're really excited. So people who are interested can also talk to some of our first batch students to figure out what prompted them, what interested them, what motivated them, and what was their thought process when they actually decided to apply. And we'll be happy to share some of those details. So Udayan, I don't want to get into specific salary related conversations, because the question you ask is very generic. You know, it could range. I mean, it'll be a very big range, because, as I said, there's so many different kinds of organizations that range could be very. It could start from, say, a 25-30,000 a month. It could go up to 60, 70, 80,000 a month. So the range is really huge, and where, what kind of job you take, where you take, will really define the compensation. But today, given the entire compensation question around the development sector, we've done, we've tried to get an understanding of compensation in other areas. And, more and more we are finding that the development sector is fairly competitive. Today a fresh lawyer from the not the top schools, but a fresh engineer from a regular engineering school gets pretty much the same pay that a development sector professional is paid. And even within development sector, there is huge variation, depends on where you come from. While the development sector salaries will never be as competitive as corporate sector, but they are today they've reached a level where they are they're fairly up there. They enable you to lead lives of as I said earlier, good lives of dignity and satisfaction. It's not, as one of the students I talked to at one of our sessions, she said, "Hey, I don't want to give up my Starbucks coffee," and I laughed because while the question was relevant, I just found the example amusing. But I told her that you really don't need to give up your Starbucks coffee today to work in the sector. Thank you, Manisha. Thank you, Kaushik. Udayan, I hope that helps answer your question. So we are about 1 hour and 10 minutes into the webinar. Shall I take up the question of the program and give a brief? I'm happy to do that if people want. I'm also happy to do it separately, not part of the webinar.
Now that you have some time at hand, Gaurav, so I think it will be a good idea to just give a broad preview.
Okay. So let me try and give you a fairly quick preview about the program. And since we are not using the presentation, I hope you can now see me. Great. So, the ISDM program is a 1-year full-time postgraduate program in development leadership. The idea is to help create a cadre of passionate, committed leaders and managers who understand the sector and are able to, as I've said earlier in the presentation, able to approach organization building with a very, very different mindset. Which involves an understanding of the space and an understanding of the self and an understanding of systems overall. If you look at it from a curriculum standpoint, okay, let me start with the program structure. Maybe that'll help. So it is a 1-year, 50-week full-time program. Our campus is in Delhi, NCR. It's in Sector 62, Noida. The program is going to start on the 24th of July this year. From an admissions standpoint, I think we are almost, so this is the last phase of admissions right now, and the last date for admissions is June, or for applications rather, is June 24th or June 25th, one of the two. It's there on our website. We have, I think, more or less through with our first cohort. We're looking at about 50 to 60 people. And in the first 4 phases of admissions, we've got a lot of good applications, and a lot of, the entire batch is coming together as a very, very diverse and very interesting batch. A lot of people with work experience have actually applied and will be part of the cohort. Having said that, about 15–20% of the cohort will be freshers. A lot of the freshers are also postgraduate freshers, not just undergrad freshers. We have people, majority of people having social sector experience, and some people who've come from the corporate space into the program. From a program structure standpoint, again, the 50 weeks is broken up into 8 terms of an average of about 6 weeks each. 6 out of those 8 terms are classroom terms, and 2 terms are field terms. The first 2 terms are classroom terms. The third term is a 2-week district immersion journey called Realizing India. 4, 5, and 6 terms 4, 5, and 6 are classroom terms again. Term 7 is an 8-week residency, a problem-solving kind of a residency with our partner organizations. And term 8 is the final classroom term. From a curriculum standpoint, the curriculum really is broken up into multiple themes. Starting from understanding development and really what it means, what are the various ways of looking at it, how has the concept evolved over time, how is the sector structured in India, who are the various players, what are their roles, what are the challenges of working in this sector, etc. To the next theme, which is around understanding the self. We believe that work in this sector requires a lot of patience. It requires a long-term mindset. And the ability to actually work, continuously under fairly difficult circumstances, and therefore it's important that you are able to situate the reasons for working in the sector within you rather than externally, and are able to find the right are able to find your sweet spot in the sector. And so a lot of focus on understanding the self, on concepts like personal mastery, socio-emotional intelligence, developing a bias towards action, and ideas like transformative leadership. The third theme is entirely around organization building, and I've talked about it earlier. So really, how do we go about building world-class social organizations with appropriate strategy, structure, systems, processes, and culture? Fourth is around design of large-scale design, implementation, evaluation, and monitoring of large-scale social interventions. And the fifth theme is really around the entire systems thinking and creation of collaborative ecosystem. And that really will be an ongoing theme across the program, because for us, one of the things which is really missing in the sector is collaboration. So how do we, through ISDM and through the ambassadors of ISDM over the years to come, improve the collaboration index in the sector? Because clearly competition doesn't work in this space. So that's what the program looks like from a curriculum standpoint. From a pedagogy standpoint, it is a program designed for adults. So a lot of focus on adult learning. So lots of focus on case studies, discussions, debates, projects, group projects, individual projects, presentations, movies, theater. Most of the faculty who will actually be coming in will be visiting faculty. And will be people who are practitioners, social leaders, researchers, academicians with practice experience. And therefore, our students will actually get a flavor of what's happening on the ground and will be able to relate what they are learning. It won't be a pure classroom experience in that from that standpoint. It'll be really related to what's happening on the ground. We also have, as the backbone of the entire pedagogical process, we have a process called problem-based learning, where our students again will be broken up into groups, and every week pretty much for those 50 weeks, you'll start your week with the PBL process, where you'll be given questions. And throughout the week, you'll be asked to work in groups, large groups, small groups, individually, to find answers to these questions, to work together, to collaborate, to discuss, debate, and then come back and present your findings to the larger group. Thereby learning not just by the theory of it, but also learning from the process of learning in the large group sessions. So that's very brief overview of the program. I think most of you already know that we are offering 100% tuition scholarships for the first batch of this program. And given the kind of partners that we've been able to get even before our first batch started, both from a recruitment standpoint as well as from a funding standpoint, we have jobs for pretty much a variety of different kinds of jobs lined up. Though a lot of our students are actually people who are saying, hey, we want to start our own organization after this. So it's a good mix of people who are social entrepreneurs and people who want to work in the space and organize existing organizations. And we've also been able to tie up the scholarships bit because there is huge belief in the program and a lot of belief in what this program and what ISDM overall can do for the space and the sector as such. So I hope that helps. That's a very, very brief overview of the program, the curriculum. Great. Then Gagan, I think we can end the webinar. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us. I hope it was useful. You can do send us back your feedback, and in case of any more questions, do write into us. Thank you very much.